The wind was the only thing speaking that morning. It hissed low through the ponderosa pines, curled around rocks crusted in snow, and pressed against the deerskin shoulders of Luca Greyhawk as he moved through the frozen hush. His moccasins left soft impressions in the white powder. His breath came slow. He wasn't in a hurry. Not anymore. He had come looking for willow bark to ease an old man's cough, but the forest was thick with something else today, an unease that gripped him low in his belly. It was the kind of knowing that lived in his bones, inherited from a line of men who track storms and sorrow better than stars. He paused at a clearing near the base of a crooked cedar, where the snow had drifted strangely. Not smooth like elsewhere, broken, shallow in spots, piled too high in others. He crouched, gloved fingers brushing the top layer, still and listening. And then he heard it. A sound so faint it could have been mistaken for a trick of the trees. But it wasn't wind. It wasn't animal. It was something human, barely, like the last breath before silence. He dropped to his knees. Luca began digging with bare hands, shoving snow aside, the cold biting through his calluses until his skin cracked and bled. Beneath the powder was crusted ice, and below that, earth. But the earth gave. A black tuft of hair surfaced first, soaking wet, matted with frost. Then a hand. Pale. Still. Fingernails caked with dirt. He clawed faster, whispering prayers to no one in particular. Time slowed. His breath sounded like thunder in his ears. And then. Her face. She looked like death. Eyes closed. Lips blue. A bruise along her left cheekbone bloomed like ink. Her chest didn't move. No, he whispered. He put his ear to her mouth. And there, buried beneath the storm and silence, came a sound so small, so broken, it could have been a lie. Please, don't put me back. Luca flinched. The woman's eyes opened, slits of frightened dark. She didn't scream. She didn't weep. She simply breathed. Barely. You're safe, Luca said softly, though the words felt foreign. He hadn't spoken aloud in days. She closed her eyes again, and something in her face, grief or mercy, softened. He wrapped her in his cloak, lifted her into his arms. She was heavy with muscle and warmth, and yet he carried her as if she were made of something sacred. Snow hissed beneath his feet as he turned back toward the trail, his footprints now doubled. By the time they reached his cabin, a half-mile of silence and sweat, her head had slumped against his chest. But her breathing held. Inside, the fire had burned low. He laid her beside it, careful not to jar her. The flames threw gold across her skin, and for the first time he saw her full face, full arms, full hips. A woman who had not been loved gently by this world. Her black hair spread over the wool blanket like spilt ink. She did not belong to the mountains, and yet she had survived them. He poured hot water from the kettle into a chipped basin, dipped a rag, and began to clean the soil from her face. She stirred once. "Why'd you dig me out?" she whispered. He paused. "Because I heard someone worth saving." Her eyes didn't open. But he saw the faintest crease at their corners. A frown or a smile trying to be born. Later, he fed her broth from a carved spoon. She could only take a few sips, but she held the cup herself. Her fingers were red, nails torn, wrists bruised. He noticed how she kept her arms close to her chest, protective, ashamed. That night, the storm outside deepened. He set out another blanket, gave her space. Still, she shivered. "Name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Bessie." "Luca," he said. She nodded, eyes half closed. "He said no one would miss me." "He didn't ask who." "Not yet." Bessie turned her face toward the fire, and her voice dropped to a near whisper. "He told me I took up too much room. Said I laughed too loud. Said folks in town snickered when I walked by. I never thought he'd mean to kill me." She closed her eyes again, and this time sleep took her. Luca sat by the hearth for a long while, sharpening his knife out of old habit, though he had no use for it tonight. He watched the snow pile up at the corners of the windows. The wind beat soft rhythms against the wood. Outside, the world was silent. But inside, something stirred. Not loud. Not grand. Just breath and warmth and the faint sound of someone surviving what should have ended her. By morning, the snow had covered every footprint they left in the forest. But some things, Luca knew, don't stay buried. Luca awoke to the smell of thawing earth and birch smoke. The fire had burned down to a soft orange core. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the pines hunched under the weight of new snow. He heard her breathing before he saw her steady now, with a rasp like wind through a narrow pass. Bessie lay beneath his heaviest quilt, her cheeks flushed from sleep or fever. Her black hair curled at the edges where it had dried overnight. She did not open her eyes, but when he knelt beside her and set a bowl of broth on the stool, she spoke without looking at him. "You don't have to be kind, you know." His hands paused mid-motion. "It's not kindness. You were buried." A short laugh escaped her, brittle as pine needles. "Might be the same thing." She drank slowly. Luca didn't press her. They sat like that for a time, him in the rocking chair, sharpening a twig for kindling, her under the covers, bones realigning with the idea of being safe. Her eyes moved around the cabin, taking it in, the wooden cradle in the corner, the bough above the hearth, the fur-lined coat that had once belonged to someone smaller than Luca. "You had a wife." He didn't answer. "Is that her coat I'm wearing?" A long silence. "Yes," he said. Bessie nodded and took another sip. "She must have been small." She was. The crackle of the fire filled the rest. Luca didn't offer more. Bessie didn't ask. By the third day, she could sit up. Her bruises bloomed purple and green across her arms, stark against the pale skin of her wrists. She combed her fingers through her hair and winced when they caught in tangles. Luca handed her his bone-handled comb. She took it gently, almost reverently. "I always had thick hair. Mama used to say it was a curse. Said no decent man wants a woman who sheds like a hound." He didn't smile, but something in his face eased. She kept combing. "That town over the ridge, Silt Creek, you know it?" "I've been. That's where I came from." "That's where he came from too." Luca leaned forward. "He?" She met his eyes. "The man who buried me. Isaac Slater. He was supposed to marry me." There was no tremble in her voice. Only the weariness of someone repeating a story she'd already told to the night and gotten no comfort back. "He courted me for near 6 months. Said I was beautiful, said he liked women with meat on their bones. I made him pies. Let him sit at Mama's table. Thought maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong all them years, that maybe I wasn't some mistake walking around in a woman's skin." She looked down at her hands. "But folks started laughing when we walked past. Little things, at first snide jokes, whispers. They'd call me Miss Big Behind when I wasn't looking. Said Isaac must be desperate or drunk. And one day he just changed. Cold. Distant. I thought he'd drift, like all the others." She stopped speaking. Luca waited. "He asked me to go for a walk that morning. Said he wanted to talk in private. We went into the woods near the old rail line. I followed because, well, you follow the men who say they love you, don't you?" Her voice cracked on the word love, and she cleared her throat to steady it. "He knocked me down with a shovel. Tied my hands. Didn't say a word. Just dug." She looked at Luca then, not as a rescuer, but as a witness. "And the worst part, Mr. Greyhawk, is I didn't fight. Not really. I just kept thinking, maybe now they'll stop laughing." He reached across the space and laid his hand near hers, not touching. "Just letting it rest, steady and warm." "You weren't meant to be buried," he said. Bessie turned back to the fire. "Maybe. But the town would disagree." Later that week, Luca hitched up his sled to the mule. Bessie, wrapped in furs, climbed in without complaint. She didn't ask where they were going. She just watched the trees pass like silent witnesses. By the time they reached Silt Creek, the sky was the color of pewter. People turned to stare. The town hadn't changed: narrow buildings with soot-stained chimneys, muddy roads half frozen in ruts, the mercantile where gossip was cheaper than flour. Bessie sat straight-backed in the sled. She did not lower her gaze. "Why are we here?" she asked as Luca tied off the mule. "Figured you'd want to see who survived the winter," he said. The shopkeeper, Miss Lenora Brigg, stepped out from behind her counter as they entered. Her eyes flicked to Bessie, then away again, like she'd seen a ghost and wasn't sure if it was polite to scream. "Well, look who's returned." Bessie said nothing. Luca met the woman's gaze until she looked down. They bought flour, soap, new wool. Bessie picked out a comb and a bar of lavender lye. No one asked her where she'd been. No one apologized. As they left, a boy outside whispered to another, "She's the one he buried." Bessie heard. Her shoulders stiffened, but she kept walking. That night, back at the cabin, she sat by the hearth, combing her hair with the new comb. "I shouldn't have gone," she said. "You needed to." She turned. "I thought maybe if they saw me walking, they'd see me different. But I'm still a punchline. Just one that breathes." Luca was quiet a long time. "You're not who they see. And you're not who he buried." She swallowed hard. "Then who am I?" He looked at her, really looked, and said, "You're someone who came back." She did not cry. But something in her settled. He rose, added another log to the fire. Outside, the wind picked up again, brushing snow from the limbs of trees, reshaping the drifts into something softer. And for the first time since she woke in his cabin, Bessie asked a question with no fear in her voice. "Will you teach me to trap rabbits?" He smiled, small and rare, like a flame flickering in cold air. "Yes." The fire popped. Tomorrow, the fall would begin. The snow melted slow that week. It dripped from the roof like a clock ticking backward, soft and patient, reshaping the world one drop at a time. Bessie watched it from Luca's porch wrapped in a wool shawl, steam curling from the tin mug in her hands. She had begun to stand straighter, her bruises fading from plum to yellow, but she still flinched when the wind whistled just right, like footsteps crunching behind her. Luca had not asked her to stay. But he hadn't told her to go either. Instead, he started leaving 2 bowls on the table. Set an extra log on the fire. And when he went hunting, he left a short note carved into a stick, "Back by dusk." That was all. That was enough. On the 4th morning, Bessie opened the door to find a rabbit trap resting at her feet. Clean, oiled, simple. She looked up. Luca stood near the trees, his back to her, splitting wood. He did not turn around, but he must have known she was watching. He paused just long enough to be noticed, then kept going. By noon, she was kneeling beside him in the woods, learning how to set the trap. He showed her without words. Placed each twig with care. Let her try, let her fail. When she got it right, he nodded once and moved on. She smiled. They worked side by side like that for days, his silence no longer a wall, but a rhythm. She began to understand it, how it protected something, how it listened. Not the silence of indifference, but of someone who knew the cost of speaking too soon. At night, she cooked. Her hands remembered how to roll dough, how to braid a pie crust. Luca watched her move with ease through his kitchen, as if the space had been waiting for her shape. Once, he asked about the song she hummed while she stirred beans. "It's one Mama made up," she said. "Said if you sing to food, it knows it's meant to nourish." He didn't reply. But the next night, she heard him hum it softly while tending the fire. Spring crept in beneath the snow, turning the edges of things green. Luca started carving again, small animals, feathered arrows, the curve of a bear's paw. Bessie kept them on the mantel. "If you're gonna watch me walk," she told the wooden critters, "you better learn to be kind." He noticed how she checked the window each time the wind picked up, how she jumped when branches knocked against the walls. The wounds on her body were healing, but something deeper still trembled beneath her skin. Then came the day the letter arrived. Luca had gone to the trading post and returned with flour, salt, and a torn envelope. "Your name was on it," he said, placing it beside her cup. She stared at it for a long time before opening it. The handwriting was neat, cruel in its carefulness. "Miss Cartwright. My apologies. I spoke too soon about your passing. Folks are asking questions. I suggest you keep quiet. For everyone's sake. I.S." She folded the letter without flinching. "What do you want to do?" Luca asked. Bessie exhaled slowly. "Nothing." His brow furrowed. "I want a bake," she added. "If I'm going to live, I want the house to smell sweet." That night she baked a peach pie. The smell filled every corner of the cabin. She served Luca the first slice. He ate in silence, but his eyes closed when the taste hit his tongue. "He thinks I'll stay quiet," she said, setting down her fork. "Thinks I'll hide in a cabin forever because I'm fat and frightened and grateful to be alive." "You don't have to prove anything to him," Luca said. "I'm not." Her gaze met his. "But I've got to prove something to myself." A week later, they returned to Silt Creek. It was market day. The street was swollen with voices, carts, boots stomping over thawed mud. Bessie wore a clean blue dress, cinched at the waist with a rope. Her thick hair was braided, looped like a crown. Luca walked beside her, rifle slung casually over his back. They drew stairs again, but this time, Bessie met every eye. They walked into the bakery. She left a peach pie on the counter with a note, "No charge. Just wanted you to taste something soft that didn't come from your own mouths." She walked back out without waiting for a reply. Isaac Slater was not there. Not yet. They passed the post office, the blacksmith, the chapel. Luca paused outside the mercantile. "You sure?" She nodded. Inside, Miss Lenora Brigg looked up from her ledger. "Miss Cartwright," she said stiffly. "Miss Brigg." They stood in silence for a breath too long. Then Bessie stepped closer, hands folded. "I wanted you to know I ain't dead. I ain't ashamed. And I sure as hell ain't quiet." Miss Brigg swallowed hard. "No one expected you to come back." "That's the trouble," Bessie said. "Y'all only expect ghosts." She turned and left. Back at the cabin, Luca poured tea. Bessie sat by the fire, legs tucked beneath her. He handed her the cup, careful not to touch her fingers. "Why'd you really go?" She took a sip, eyes glowing in the firelight. "Because for years, I made myself small. Took up less room, wore dark dresses, smiled soft, walked fast. But I still ended up in the dirt. So now?" She set the cup down. "I take up space." The next morning, Luca found her standing outside just before dawn. She was barefoot in the snow, arms open to the rising light. Her breath fogged the air. She was humming that same old tune louder now, as if she didn't care who heard. He didn't call her back inside. Instead, he stood behind her, close enough that their shadows mingled in the snow. And for a moment, neither of them moved. "I wasn't meant to survive," she said softly. "So I guess I get to decide how I live." Luca nodded once. And in that silence, thick with morning frost and memory, something settled between them, not love, not yet, but the quiet promise of presence. A vow not spoken, but felt. The knock came just after sundown. Luca had been oiling the door hinges while Bessie stitched a patch onto his coat. The cabin was warm, scented with pine and the last of the stew. Outside, the wind had gone still, too still. The kind of hush that fell over the land before trouble stepped out of the trees. He stood slowly, resting the oil can on the shelf. Bessie's hands stilled mid-stitch. She didn't ask who it might be. Her eyes said enough. A memory had returned to the porch. Luca opened the door. There he was. Isaac Slater. Hat in hand, smile like a blade held behind the teeth. His coat was city-made now, fitted and clean. His boots too polished for backcountry. His eyes flicked from Luca to the figure beside the hearth. "Well, look at you," he said. Bessie didn't rise. Isaac stepped forward, but Luca filled the doorway. "Didn't think you'd survive," Isaac said. "Though I suppose cockroaches don't die easy." Luca didn't speak. His hands stayed loose by his sides, but his body had gone still as tree bark. Bessie stood. She stepped up behind Luca and laid her hand on his arm. Her voice was clear. "Why are you here?" Isaac tilted his head. "Just came to say I've had time to think. A man gets scared, you know. Feels the weight of things. You're not easy to carry, Bessie." The insult lay quiet in the air between them. She nodded once, as if he just confirmed something she'd always known. "You buried me." He laughed. "Now that ain't true. I walked away. You got yourself buried." Luca took a single step forward. Isaac backed off, one foot onto the snow. "Let's not start swinging tomahawks," Isaac said. "I came peaceful. Just wanted to let you know folks are talking. Might not be safe if certain things came to light." "Are you threatening her?" Luca asked, voice low, even. Isaac blinked. "No. Of course not. Just saying, Silt Creek's small. Folks forget easy, but not if they're reminded." Bessie spoke again. "You want me to vanish again?" Isaac looked at her for a long time. "I want peace." She shook her head. "No, you want silence." He turned then, coat whipping behind him as he stepped into the night. "Suit yourself," he called over his shoulder. "Just don't cry when they turn on you." The door closed with a soft thud. Luca locked it. Bessie sat back down, her face unreadable. Luca stood for a while, listening to the wind rise again. The storm that hadn't come earlier was building now, pacing just beyond the ridge. "I could end it," Luca said finally. "You know that." "I know," she whispered. "But then I'd just be another woman whose justice came from a man." He nodded once, heavy and slow. The next day, they went back to town. The church was full, something about a new bell and a pie auction. Luca wore his old jacket, mended with Bessie's thread. Bessie wore the same blue dress, but this time she added a ribbon at her throat. They walked in together. People noticed. Isaac stood near the back, leaning against the pew like he owned the wood. When Bessie entered, he stiffened. Whispers started like brushfire, quiet, quick, consuming. Bessie walked past them all. Up front, near the altar, she turned and looked out at the crowd. Her voice, when it came, was strong. "Some of you think I should have stayed in the dirt. Some of you helped him dig. Some just laughed. And some were silent, which is its own kind of cruelty." She paused. "I don't need your apology. I don't need your permission. I'm not here to shame you. I'm here because I came back." A murmur swept the church. One old woman dabbed her eyes. A man shifted uncomfortably near the doorway. Isaac stepped forward. "You lying witch. You're lucky someone even looked at you, fat as you are." Luca moved then, fast and quiet, his presence between Bessie and Isaac like a wall of bone and muscle. "She's not lucky," Luca said. "She's alive." Isaac reached for something in his coat, but two others grabbed his arms before he could move. One was the preacher. The other was the sheriff's wife. "We've heard enough," she said. Isaac struggled, then stilled. The crowd had turned. The sheriff arrived a few minutes later and took Isaac outside without fuss. No cuffs. Just a firm grip and a quiet escort. Bessie stood still at the front of the room, trembling slightly. The preacher stepped forward. "Miss Cartwright, would you like to say the blessing for the food?" She blinked, surprised. Then nodded. Her voice shook on the first line but steadied by the second. "Lord, bless this table. Bless the mouths that mocked me, for they taught me to sing louder. Bless the hands that tried to bury me, for they taught me how to dig. And bless the ones who stayed silent, may they one day find their voices. After the amen, there was silence. Then someone clapped. It started slow. One woman. Then another. Then more. Not loud. Not wild. But warm. Solid. Bessie looked at Luca. He nodded. They walked out together as the snow began to fall again, not hard, but soft, gentle as forgiveness, quiet as breath. And for the first time since her fingers clawed upward through that frozen earth, Bessie smiled without apology. The snow came back quietly that night, not as a storm, but as a hush blanketing the pines, softening the roof, filling the hollows in the trail outside Luca's cabin. Inside, the fire cracked low and steady. Luca sat in his chair, half whittling, half watching the woman who now moved through his home like she belonged to it. Bessie had her back to him, humming as she folded a length of muslin, the seams precise. Her black hair was braided over one shoulder. She wasn't hiding her size anymore. She didn't speak in whispers. But tonight, there was something quieter about her again, like the beginning of a song she hadn't sung in years. "You remember what I whispered when you found me?" she asked, not turning. Luca rested the knife beside the wood. "I remember." She nodded, still folding. "That night, I wasn't asking to be saved. I didn't believe I could be. I just didn't want to be alone in the dark." He stood, crossed the room. The heat from the fire wrapped around them both. "You're not," he said. She turned finally, eyes full of snowlight and memory. "Then I guess I can tell you the rest of what I meant." She walked to the door, opened it slowly. The snow had stopped falling. Moonlight bathed the trail in silver. Trees stood tall and bare, like sentinels carved from ash and truth. Luca followed her out. They stepped onto the porch, boots crunching soft over the new layer. Her hand reached for his, uncertain, but brave. He took it. Held it. Not like a claim. Like an anchor. "When I was in that grave," she said, "I thought of every name I'd been called. Hog. Ox. Whale. I thought of every time I'd laughed too loud, eaten too much, dared to wear a dress with color. And I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I really did take up too much space." Her voice shook, but she didn't look away from the dark line of trees ahead. "But then, right before the dirt reached my mouth, I thought of one other thing. Just one. I thought I never meant anyone harm. I loved chickens. I sang to bread. I cared for sick dogs. I waited for love longer than most would have. I was never cruel. And if that wasn't enough to live for, I didn't want to live at all." Luca's grip tightened slightly. "That's what I meant," she said. "When I whispered. I wasn't asking to be saved. I was confessing that I still believed kindness should be enough." Luca didn't speak. Instead, he brought her hand to his chest, just over the place where his heartbeat had been dulled for years. His voice, when it came, was rough as worn leather. "It was enough." She closed her eyes. The snow fell again, faint, flitting like ash. That night, they didn't speak of marriage. There were no declarations. But when he woke at dawn, she was still beside him, her back warm against his. Her braid had come undone in the night. He reached up, gently brushed the loose strands from her cheek. By the next week, they were back in town, but this time for something ordinary. Bessie had entered her bread into the spring fair. Luca stood beside her, watching her hands flutter with nervous energy as judges tasted her slices. When she won second place, she laughed, not because it was a prize, but because it was hers. Her name was said aloud, and no one winced. A child even asked for her recipe. As they left the gathering, a young woman in a green shawl touched Bessie's arm. "I remember you from before," she said. "You used to pass my house singing. I was little then, but I liked your voice. I just wanted to say I'm glad you're still singing." Bessie swallowed hard. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, back at the cabin, Luca pulled something from the mantel and held it out to her. It was a simple ring, carved from cedar, smoothed at the edges. I made it from the same tree I found you under, he said. Didn't plan on giving it to anyone. Just kept carving. Bessie didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She took the ring, turned it in her fingers, and slid it on. It fits, she said. They were married the following Sunday, not in a church, not in town, but beneath that same cedar, its boughs reaching toward the sky like old arms lifted in blessing. Only 2 people came, the preacher and the old man whose cough Luca had once eased with willow bark. But the trees bore witness, and the snow, melting slow, blessed their boots with water from the thaw. After the vows, Bessie leaned in, pressing her lips near Luca's ear. And once again, she whispered. He smiled, eyes closed. You're not going to tell me what that one means, are you? He asked. Not yet, she said. Some things stay buried until they bloom. That night, they lit a single lantern and sat on the porch, shoulders touching. Luca carved. Bessie sang. The world was quiet again, but not hollow. Not silent. Because sometimes, what's buried isn't dead. Sometimes, it's just waiting for someone to listen. And sometimes, just sometimes, the whisper in the dark is a beginning. Not an end.